What if Mr Miyagi was still alive in Cobra Kai Part 3? Let's hop into it. So I think it's important to mention that this video will just go over what would have happened over the rest of the Season 1 timeline if Mr Miyagi was still alive, since in the first two videos I went into quite a lot of detail about what would have happened, and although that's good, this video series will just have hundreds of parts if I go into that much detail every time, and I just want to move on to some other things and get some more stuff done. So this is going to cover what would have happened over the rest of Season 1, as opposed to covering what would have happened in Season 1 Episode 3 if Mr Miyagi was still alive. So pretty much after Mr Miyagi finding out that Johnny had reopened Cobra Kai, and after most of the regular things happened in the series except that Daniel was slightly different and more balanced, Daniel would find out that Mr Miyagi had been helping Johnny set up the dojo, and Miguel would be there kind of training whatever, but he's in the background and Daniel doesn't notice him. And also Miguel wouldn't be involved in any of the confrontation, but pretty much Daniel would just be very angry and feel very betrayed that Mr Miyagi is doing this, and he'd be like, what are you doing here, why are you working with him? Since he's a bit rusty at karate, Daniel would try to strike Johnny and Mr Miyagi would get in the way and just block him and completely just once over Daniel. He wouldn't hurt him too badly, but he'd just prevent him from being able to attack. Thereafter, for the rest of the season, Johnny would train Miguel like a sensei, and eventually Miguel would kind of come up against Kyler and Brooks and those people every so often, but would be defending himself better. Mr Miyagi would also at the same time be giving advice and coaching to Johnny and helping him become a better, more rounded sensei, and even slowly convince Johnny to be more accepting of some of Miyagi-Do's values, and he manages to project that onto Miguel. So instead of there being a massive fight where Miguel just completely beats everyone up, it's a very similar kind of fight to the cafeteria fight, but you can tell that Miguel's intention is purely only because he wants to defend himself. So pretty much the same kind of sequence that happened in the cafeteria, because Miguel did act out of defense first, not offense, even in the mainstream Season 1 timeline. Thereafter, Miguel would be much more respected, Kyler and Brooks would be a bit more wary of him and wouldn't pick on him so much anymore. It would convince people like Dimitri and Hawk or whatever, Eli at this point, to join Cobra Kai. Very similar stuff as what happened in Season 1 after the school fight. Cobra Kai's dojo would grow in size. However, instead of loads of the students having to leave and be really upset because Johnny just rips them to pieces and tears them apart, due to Mr Miyagi's wisdom, Johnny would feel kind of that he needs to be slightly less aggressive and slightly less harsh on all the students. He has to tell them the truth and be brutally honest, but he does not have to knock them down, kick them when they're down. So he would kind of be honest and say, it's not going to be easy for most of you to do this, you're going to have to work very hard, you're not the best version of yourself yet, but if you work hard you can become the best version of yourself, and it'd be more inspirational. And in this timeline, Dimitri does not quit, and also Dimitri does not object as much to some of Johnny's methods because they've been slightly revised under the guidance of Mr Miyagi. I believe Mr Miyagi would not be present in any of the dojo training, but after training's done, Mr Miyagi would be sat in the back room, and then Johnny would speak to him and would kind of hear some wisdom, hear some Miyagi wisdom. Mr Miyagi would guide him. At the same time, we'd see Daniel's life just go side by side. He's trying to manage his family affairs, he's trying to just keep the dealership running and get on with life. Also at this point, he would still be speaking to Mr Miyagi, and he'd be like, why are you with this guy, why are you helping Johnny, why are you helping him get better? And Mr Miyagi would come up with some kind of analogy, something like speckled egg is still good on the inside, or still has good yolk, which is referring to the fact that despite Johnny at face value hasn't had the best of life, hasn't made the best choices, and isn't the best person, deep down inside there is still goodness, and he still has the potential to become a decent person, or in the egg's case, it still has the ability and potential to be a good egg and enjoyable meal for somebody if they desire to eat it or cook it. It can be assumed that Miguel and Sam both attend West Valley, as Mr Miyagi would have little to no bearing on this, and it can therefore be assumed that Miguel develops a crush on Sam when he first goes to school. However, he sees Kyler with her, but instead of Kyler being one of her friends slash boyfriend kind of at the start of the season, she doesn't like Kyler because of the Miyagi wisdom. She knows he's not a good person, and therefore Kyler's always trying to hit on her, but she keeps rejecting him, and then one day he makes an advance on her and tries to take advantage of her. She then has to defend herself and say, get off me, push him away, and that leads him to make up rumours about her, which then leads to her being ostracised by the people of West Valley. Even after, when she tries to stand up to Kyler, Miguel ends up fighting him and Brooks and his friends and ends up beating them up. She's still ostracised, and the rumours are still floating around the school. However, eventually dies down, and during his training and during Miguel becoming more popular because he's just beaten up Kyla and people starting to like him at the school, he plucks up the confidence to ask out Sam, but rather than never admitting defeat, he gets rejected because Sam says she isn't ready to date anyone anymore right now at the minute, and Miguel's just respectful. And later on, maybe like a week or a few days later, Sam realises that Miguel is a great person and decides that she will go out with him. They go out with each other, they kiss on the first date, they end up going to golf and stuff because Johnny says that's a place he'd approve of as opposed to going to an observatory or something. And the octopus thing happens with the stuffed animal, the pictures, all that. However, eventually at some point during the series, I feel like if they had kind of an homage to the Karate Kid, especially with Mr Miyagi being alive, it would be cool. So maybe there's a part of the series in which Sam says that her and Miguel are going to go on a date, but instead of her and Miguel going on a date, at first, Kyla finds her, and then he forces her against a wall and kisses her, and Miguel thinks that she cheated on her, and then he's really rude and really horrible to her, which means they temporarily break up until the tournament, but that comes later. Robbie is still Johnny's son and is still going down the same path. However, when Johnny goes to see him, instead of him saying you're a pathetic loser and that's it, Mr Miyagi pays Robbie a visit and actually kind of takes him under his wing until one day, randomly at one point, Robbie joins Cobra Kai, it's still going to be called Cobra Kai, ran by Johnny but under the guidance of Mr Miyagi. And then Robbie learns karate in the same way, but I'd like to think that maybe instead of Daniel taking him under his wing, Robbie actually trains privately with Mr Miyagi at first, on the tree, and the same things that Daniel taught him, but just by Mr Miyagi, so maybe a slightly more advanced level. And Daniel is constantly pleading to Mr Miyagi, don't trust this guy, he's bad, but Mr Miyagi is still trying to talk Daniel around, and he's still trying to make Johnny into a good person. Inevitably, Johnny decides to enter Cobra Kai for the tournament, and after the meeting, Mr Miyagi shows up and speaks up for Johnny, which allows Cobra Kai to be re-entered into the tournament. Daniel's constantly trying to contest it and he's angry. However, throughout the season, with the guidance of Mr Miyagi, he manages to somehow get Johnny and Daniel to once and for all forget everything, bury it. And the way he does this is the same way in which Robbie and Miguel squashed their beef in season 5. Daniel and Johnny have a rematch to end all rematches, and they just fight each other, and we'll assume it ends kind of in a draw like it did in the season 4 timeline when Johnny and Daniel fought to see who got control of Miyagi-Do and Eagle Fang. And because of that, Daniel's now on board and becomes co-sensei partly and has an input, and even takes Robbie on at the dealership like he normally did. And then it gets to the tournament, Miguel wins against Robbie in the final, and that's the end. So that's kind of a nice summary. I didn't really want the video to be this long, but I just wanted to get done with at least season 1 if Mr Miyagi was still alive without making 20 parts. So I did have to skim over some bits. If you want me to go into any more detail on anything, just let me know in the comments below. Ask questions about what about this, what about that, and I'll try and make a future video addressing these things. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you've enjoyed the series. If you do, leave a like and tell me that you enjoyed the series, and I'll continue to season 2 and beyond. But if not, for now, it's been your main man, Maniac, and remember to stay amazing. Bye.